On today's show, Brian Zaff, fractional CFO and founder of Flight Financial. Today, we'll be talking about the connection between law firm financial management and mental health.
You really have to look at the overall financial environment of the firm, and if you can alleviate the financial stress and pressure, you often improve the mental health and wellness as well.
Welcome to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast, a show dedicated to exploring what makes law firms thrive. I'm your host, Jason Marsh. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and accomplished law firm owners in our space. Together, we'll dive deep into law firm operations, marketing, technology, finance, and everything else you need to build an incredible firm that allows you to live your best life. Hey there, welcome to Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm Jason Marsh. More importantly, I'm here with Brian Zaff, and Brian, he's a fractional CFO for law firms. He's the founder and chief CFO of Flight Financial. But what he does is he helps law firm owners reduce their stress by improving their financial management and performance of their firm. But Brian, I wanted to talk to you because you recently wrote a really interesting article in the American Bar Association's Law Practice Today publication, which I'll share in the show notes. But you make a really interesting connection between mental health issues and then the financial setup of a law firm. So I'm really interested to talk about that. But before we get into the financial component, I really want to talk about the mental health aspect because I do see that coming up more frequently. And you highlight that lawyers are twice as likely as non-lawyers to experience suicidal thoughts. 70% report, anxiety. I mean, does it seem like this is something new, or is the legal profession experiencing some sort of mental health crisis?
Yeah, I think, and if we look at the recent survey results, over half of the respondents say they believe that mental health is at a crisis level for the industry, but some of it's just the way it's always been done, right? Lawyers expect to work long hours, to constantly be on call, trying to service clients. And so some of that is natural that it leads to burnout, but it does seem that in recent years that this has kind of escalated.
Yeah, because I know just seeing in other publications, I know a topic that I see just come up, and because I also am an editor of Law Practice Today, and so I see this topic circulating a lot, over the course of a year. I think there's even sometimes issues dedicated to mental health in the legal profession. And, it's just, I wonder, is there something about being a lawyer in particular that makes them more susceptible to these mental health that's different? And I know you work with some other types of entrepreneurs, but is there something inherently different about being a lawyer?
Big thing is just the billable hour, because for a lot of lawyers, it's just their sense of self-worth is tied up in just how much they're billing, what their hours are. I mean, that's kind of the way these large, the big law firms run it. And then that trickles down to the smaller firms as well. So when you feel like you're only as good as how many hours you're billing, it kind of creates this vicious cycle.
Yeah, it's almost like you're really quantifying a person's value, professional value, whether it's hours, rates, the combination of those two things, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I do think we're starting to see, I think there's just more mental health awareness going on as well. And the legal industry is seeing that. And the younger generation of lawyers, they don't want to work the same hours. So we're starting to see more experimentation with, value-based pricing models for law firms, kind of fixed fee approaches, but there's still a long way to go with it.
And in terms of this type of stress and burnout and ultimate mental health issues that come out of those things, is it more particular to large firms where the billable hour is everything, or is it smaller firms where you have a firm leader that's also has to do billable hours, but also has to run all the admin of the firm in a lot of cases and juggling all of those tasks?
And I think it depends. If you look at the recent reports on this, I mean, definitely the large firms, there's a well-known just kind of crisis level of burnout. But then at the small firm, you add on not only the billable hour pressures, but also, it's a lot of these owners feel like it's on their shoulders, that everything rests with them. And maybe they've got other lawyers who are partners, but those lawyers might not be business partners. So it's kind of additional challenges that they're taking on.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at that. And so what typically, when you see the manifestation of someone that's experiencing, all of whatever, whether it's mental health challenges, just burnout, how does that actually impact their work and professionally? And then the follow-up is then how could that possibly impact their personal life and overall well-being?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the answer really is that it has a negative effect. And they've actually done studies on this as well, that, your professionalism takes a significant hit. You're less able to respond to client demands. You're less adaptable. Just it takes you longer to get work done. So it has a quantifiable impact. If they took the time to see how many billable hours were at risk with this, it does affect the professionalism, which affects the industry as a whole. And then, a lot of lawyers will take that stress home with them too. So it's obviously affecting their personal relationships as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. And I certainly can relate to this as an entrepreneur, just having all the hats you have to wear, and you're responsible entirely for your income, and have to, sometimes you can feel like you're on a treadmill, especially those early days, right before you've built out a team and processes and support, and things we're going to talk about that make that transition. But just, and reading your article was talking about how a lot of the current solutions, and again, I see this like in other articles that are written, the real focus when it comes to mental health, solving that stuff is just really on wellness and self-care. And obviously those are important things, not saying they're not.
Yeah. I mean, it really is like, wellness and self-care are definitely important, but it's almost like putting a Band-Aid on the injury, because you still have the same stressful environment that created those, that stress in the first place. So it's like kind of, and what I talked about in the article is just, you really have to look at the overall financial environment of the firm. And if you can alleviate the financial stress and pressure, you often improve the mental health and wellness as well.
Yeah, and it makes so much sense. You make a great point. It is like putting a Band-Aid on it. Obviously, working on wellness and self-care is important, really, no matter what you're doing or level of stress. But if you have this incredibly stressful job and you're not fixing the root causes of that, well, that stuff isn't going to change. Now, maybe you can handle those things better, but there is a better path, right? Wouldn't it be much nicer? And you point out, and I think this is like, if for anyone that's ever read like the E-Myth, right? It's like lawyers they start law firms because they're good at practicing, right? Or good at practicing law, not because they understand financial strategy or how to run a business or what investing in a business or any of those things. And honestly, I look at myself, I started a business 15 years ago. I probably would have never done it if I actually knew what was involved. Fortunately, I was just too dumb to know that there's a lot to it. But yeah, you start a law firm, you're good at practicing law, that's what you want to focus on. But all of a sudden you find out, well, how do you get clients? How do you manage those clients? Then you got to do the work. You got to bill for the work. You've got to, file your tax. You got to do all these things. And so, yeah, I mean, they're not set for it.
No, it's like a completely different skill set that you're not trained on. And, the public school system definitely doesn't educate you, and you don't learn about it in law school. So
Yeah, you would think at some point law schools, I don't know what the mission of a law school is. Obviously, to teach you about the substance of the law, but it seems like there maybe could be some electives on how to start a law firm, things you should know. Because it's like you tell a story about a lawyer named David in the article, and what jumped out at me is you talk about, he's got the brand new Mercedes, he's taking the exotic vacations and so forth, and by all accounts, you look at that and you're like, that is a very successful practice. But what you don't realize is in the background is there's a lot of plates in the air, a lot of like weight on his shoulders, that this could all fall apart at any time if his marketing stops working as well. You got a couple unhappy clients, some bad reviews. And so, yeah, can you speak? I don't know if that was like an example of someone that you've actually worked with.
It was, and it's a common kind of stressor that I hear when I talk to law firm owners is that success doesn't feel like success, right? Like they're profitable on paper, but they feel like it's, like you said, it's all on their shoulders. Like if they step away to take a vacation, when they come back, they feel like things are chaotic. They always feel like they have to accept all these maybe more demanding or lower paying clients because they worry the work will dry up. So there's a lot of stressors you don't just see by seeing, oh, this is a profitable firm on paper.
Yeah, and has all the trappings around it, nice office, nice car, all nice home. Yeah, but you know what struck me as I was reading that? I mean, because it is kind of a classic case of not just for lawyers, but how a lot of people, even entrepreneurs, as their income increases, they also increase their lifestyle and their lifestyle expenses. And so the weight of all of that, whether, I don't know if you read Robert Kiyosaki or other people, it's like the idea that financial freedom and a path to wealth is all about living below your means, or even in some cases well below your means, so that you don't have that pressure to make the house payment, the car payment, go on the expensive vacation, but rather you have a buffer financially. You don't have the stress, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And I think the other thing that, Robert Kiyosaki talks about is just accumulating assets that generate income for you. And that's part of the challenge with being a law firm owner too, right? Is that a lot of the income is tied to your ability to deliver that work. And a lot of law firm owners, they don't feel like they can delegate and trust. I mean, maybe they can trust their team to do certain things, but at the back of their mind, they feel like they've got to keep their hands on everything. And when you do that, it kind of limits where you can scale to, right? There's only so many hours and so much energy in a day. So part of sorry, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say it could, because that is a thing. And any entrepreneur, you read about the founder, in this case. And here's one thing that I do find, I don't know if you come across this, but in line with what we talked about before, is a lot of lawyers, they start practices because they enjoy and they see themselves as practitioners and forget about the fact that you're a small business owner now. You are an entrepreneur above all, even before you're a lawyer. The legal services is what you offer, but people don't realize, and then they get very stuck working in the business, right? And yeah, there's always working in the business, working on the business, working above the business, all these different ways of sort of moving yourself. Because even so, before we started this recording, we were talking a little bit about small business M&A. And, one of the things is obviously, the saying goes, the more your business, the more valuable you are to your business, the less valuable your business is. So you've got to find a way to begin to build a process and a system that can work independently of you. And of course, when you do that, I think stress levels can come down quite a bit.
100%, because then you don't feel like you're tied to whatever the outputs are. It's like your inputs get magnified. And especially for a firm like a law firm, right? Key man risk is a very real problem, because if something happened to you, like in the David case study, right? If he had a heart attack, he was worried that the leads would dry up, that the business would dry up, and then what's he leaving for himself or for his family? So, like you were saying, you've got to figure out a way to build a financial machine that can make money to support your lifestyle and be a sellable asset, even if you're not actually doing the legal delivery work.
Yeah, and it's unbelievable. Yeah, and I want to get into that. Before, in terms of the biggest thing I took from David, and just to back up, like, I don't know where, maybe this is Robert Key, but, and you mentioned this in your article, and that's why I want to emphasize it, because we're going to get into how you can start to address these things. But it really isn't about how much money you make. It's how much money you keep, right? And so it's like, I think you talk about the idea that to start to create some stability and to find growth, that law firm owners, you have to change your mindset. You have to start to think about your law firm as an investment, or like it's a machine that can, have a process that can produce results consistently and efficiently.
Exactly. And on that mindset point, like your job really isn't chief lawyer, right? It's CEO of your law firm. And It's just a different kind of set of skills that you need to bring to that role.
Yeah, and I guess so then the question becomes, how do you move from that, from being the legal practitioner to getting to being that CEO type level that's providing vision and strategic direction and overseeing the moving parts of the business? I love the analogy that you use as a law firm as a machine, and it has these three parts: revenue, profit, and cash flow. But before we get into those, can you talk about how this mindset shift really can make a difference for law firm? Because I think this is, in a nutshell, what we're talking about here today.
Yeah, and it's really like kind of your self-identity. Like, okay, you're a lawyer, but now you're also a business owner. And I love the saying that you can't read the label when you're stuck inside the jar. So you really have to find it, and whether that's carving out dedicated time, maybe even just an hour a week to start to see, okay, where is my business today? Where do I want it to go? And then backing into what's that roadmap look like? And honestly, if you're okay being stressed and with your firm where it is, okay, you don't need to change. But if you want to be able to make your firm less reliant on you, you've got to figure out kind of where are you the key bottleneck in some of these processes, and how do you start backing out of that? And it starts with creating. Sorry, go ahead.
It's interesting. Have you met lawyers that are like, no, I'm perfectly happy with the stress, good to just continue on as is, just in the David approach? It's like, hey, we're going to keep on this treadmill, making money, spending a lot of money, but I'm happy with that.
I feel like that's what a lot of lawyers, at least the old school mentality, will say, right? It's like working long hours, having those trappings of success. That's a badge of honor for
It's like
a
the
certain
grind.
type of lawyer. And then I feel like there's a lot of lawyers today, though, especially after like COVID and the pandemic, right? Who did a lot of soul searching, and they realized, I don't want to be that 49-year-old or the 50-something lawyer who still has to hustle and keep going to court and doing all this kind of grinding legal work and not necessarily having anything to show for it at the end of the day.
Right. And having a life. And so, yeah, because in terms of that, like you talk about, like most lawyers, they equate their financial success with revenue, and that's it, right? And we're talking about, it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep. So why is it so important? Okay, revenue is important. You need that. But why is it so important to shift the focus to profit than cash flow?
Yeah, because, like you said, right? Like a lot of lawyers focus on their revenue and how much are we billing, but you can be billing tens of millions of dollars, but if you're only keeping a couple $100,000 of that, you've got a problem. That's not sustainable. Whereas you could bill a lot less, but if you're monitoring like the expenses and where you're kind of allocating your funds, you can keep a lot more, which means you can do less work and have more time for the things that matter.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that the thing? Like, can you imagine a scenario where you have a business that can generate 10 million or more in revenue, but you're only taking for yourself a few hundred, like the amount of work and stress to manage what it takes to generate $10 million, and then that's all you can bring home. And that's a nice, if anybody can bring home a few $100,000, listen, that's an excellent income, no question about it. But just in terms of what you're actually dealing with, and that you could have, you probably, I would imagine. I mean, I want to talk about profit. I do have a question, sort of what is a good net profit margin? We'll get to that in a second. But you also talk about how lawyers often, as they just don't have they don't have any financial strategy whatsoever. And as a result, that's why all they can do is look at the top line revenue. And that's an indicator of how we're doing this year, last year. That's a number we can look at, but it's not the only metric. And the reality is it's not the most important metric.
Well, it's not. And you really have to start with figuring out like what's most important to you. Like what do you value? What do you want out of life? And if what you want is to work a whole bunch of hours and just bill as much as possible, okay. But if you want to do meaningful legal work, but also have time for other pursuits, maybe travel or for family or whatever, that's a different type of firm you need to think of how you design.
Yeah, and okay, so let's talk about the machine and the three key parts, right? The three pillars of a successful firm, as you put it: revenue, profit, and cash flow. Can you just talk about each one of those, what each one is, why that individual one is important?
Sure. Yeah. And revenue, that's what you're billing out. That's kind of the money that comes into your firm from client payments or referral sources. And then your profits, what you're keeping, at least on paper, after you cover all the expenses to pay your team, pay for marketing, pay for your operations and overhead. And then obviously profit on paper is not necessarily the same thing as like cash in the bank, right? Collections are a huge problem. There's a lot of law firms that have these long-standing accounts receivable, and that hurts your cash flow. Or, if you're a prompt payer on paying your suppliers, that's great for them, but that's also hurting your cash flow. Or, if you're taking on debt or you're buying a lot of assets, you've got, expensive real estate that you're making improvements to, all that impacts what you're able to actually take home.
In terms of, you're describing people who have big accounts receivables, but they're real on time with their payables. So there's a mismatch there. You're paying your bills on time, yours aren't getting paid. And so your cash is getting depleted. And so all of the aspects of the business that are hungry for cash, payroll, other G&A expenses, it's like you have to have the money. And you can absolutely see how that one in particular can be very stressful for any business owner, certainly a law firm, when you just have these pile of bills, but the money that you're owed, it hasn't hit the bank account to actually pay those bills.
Well, and the other thing too is that creates, it's an extra job, and often the law firm owner is the one who ends up following up on that. And then it can hurt client relationships because you're constantly chasing them about, hey, we need you to pay on this, we need you to pay. And then it's a back and forth like, oh, do we have to negotiate an extra discount for them to get them to pay something? And it just adds extra stress.
And what do you recommend there? Is it best to use a buffer, have, an admin or a office manager, fractional CFO, somebody that's being the bad guy, so you can continue to be focused on maintaining positivity of the client relationship and not getting into the weeds on money, right? Because that can be difficult and weird for people at times.
And I would say that law firm owners really should not be the ones having to chase after AR. So if they've got somebody on their team or they have a third party who can handle that, that's great. But really, I prefer to take a preventative approach. So to the extent that you can collect cash up front at the start of the engagement, and there's different ways to do that, but that prevents a lot of the problems that you're not billing out a bunch of work and then worrying if or when you're going to get paid.
Yeah, I'll bet. And I've heard of attorneys that are like, forget AR, they're like months behind in even sending the bills out for work they've done. And to me, that's insane, right? Like, the whole idea is that you make money if you're not going to actually go out and in that scenario, you've got to offload that probably. That's got to be the first thing you offload. Just get the bills out the door, ideally up front, like you're saying.
Well, yeah, and it does become a problem, and it also can affect your relationship with your team, because if you have other attorneys and they're incentivized based off of hitting certain billable hour targets, then maybe they're billing a lot, but if they're involved in like collections and following up, I've seen law firms who they've got millions of dollars in AR sitting out because the team hasn't done the collections work on it either.
Yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, that amount of AR on the balance sheet. So let me ask you, if a lawyer, okay, they hear what you're saying, they're open to a mindset shift and saying, okay, I need to look at my firm more like a business, more like an investment. What are the biggest challenges they actually face in the execution of all of this and these various parts of their financial machine, as you put it?
I mean, the first thing, like you said, is just having that mindset shift to start thinking of it as a machine that's got parts. And then from that, it's finding the time. Like if you're tied up on like the legal work and then you're just trying to, keep the wheels on the bus, so to speak, right? It's hard to get into that mindset of, I need to carve out a block of time where I'm not going to be doing that to focus on this instead. And then from that, it's just knowing what to look at. Like lawyers, right? They're great at practicing law, They might not know a lot about like finance and how to read their P&L and their balance sheet, or even if they know how to read it, they're not thinking strategically about how do I use these numbers to improve the reality of my day to day.
Yeah, because there's so much information there. I was talking to an accountant a while back, and he was telling me he has clients that they judge the performance of their business just based on how much money is currently in the banking and the checking account. And they have no idea what their revenue or expenses are. They could actually, and in many cases, are losing money or taking distributions beyond what the business can support. So I think that's just incredible when you think. But again, it just goes back to the mindset shift that, yeah, you're an attorney and you can be a very good one, but now you're a business owner and you have to act like one and you have to think like one and do all of the things. And it's a challenge, no question, even with the best of intentions. But there is a path to doing it properly.
Yeah, and the big thing is just having a good financial management process installed in your firm, and that it's a mix of factors, right? It's understanding where you want to go and having clear financial targets. It's understanding kind of your current financial health in the business, where you are today, and then putting together a financial roadmap to get you from where you are to where you want to be. And then it's just consistently, each month at least, checking in, reviewing your numbers, comparing that to the targets you set, and then figuring out what are the kind of 1 to 3 key areas we need to focus on and what can we do to improve things.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And realistically, if somebody's considering, oh, I'm open to this, even on the low end, to do what you just described, right? You set some targets, you measure those targets, and you check in on them, period. Like, how much time are we talking to start making this shift?
It's really not much. Even if it was like an hour a month that they were spending, they would be ahead of the majority of small law firm owners with this.
Yeah, right. An hour a month. Like, who can't find an hour a month? Now, I don't know. Maybe some of these folks we're talking about here are so stressed out. They've got so many plates in the air, they literally can't find the hour a month. But realistically, anyone can find an hour a month, especially if they're trying to get on a path to, offloading some of the actual tasks and stress that come with those things.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And I don't know if you're familiar with James Clear's Atomic Habits, but that's how you build a sustainable practice, right? You start small and then you'll figure out what your actual needs are.
Yeah, it's like, so in terms of like putting together, getting some financial stability in your firm, it's not just about the firm owner, right? There's like a trickle down or a ripple effect that happens, employees, clients, even the profession as a whole. Like, can you elaborate on that a little bit and how that can really affect the firm as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, and obviously it has to start with you as the firm owner changing your mindset. But once you do that and you start taking the small steps to, look at where you are today, review your numbers, have a plan in place, you start to realize, okay, here's kind of where the gaps are. Here's the systems we need to install. And then you start to get your team on board. They'll start to buy into, okay, here's the vision. Here's how it helps me personally because I'm at a firm with a more stable financial environment. There's growth opportunities. We get to work with better clients. I can probably work less too because the owner's less worried about where the revenues and the money's coming from. And then from there, that has an impact on client delivery because the team's happier. So the clients are going to be happier. It's probably a better mix of clients. And then from there, if you spread that across all these firms kind of taking cues on this, that benefits the profession as a whole.
Yeah, no doubt. And you really could see how this can really starting to do this, how it makes such an impact on the team and how ultimately when you're moving from being the one that does all the work and being the face of to having a team that can do the work, you find out that there's people that can do a lot of little things a lot better than you would ever be able to do them. And they feel rewarded. And I guess you can start to move into like the phase of where, you hear like maybe Dan Martell talking about, you want to identify the very things that only you can do, but essentially the things you love to do and that are going to have the greatest impact on the business. And then you can have all the other people doing those other things, and they really enjoy those tasks that you can't stand and actually do them a lot better than you. And you could see how that creates the system that you're talking about.
Exactly, right? Everybody's got the things that they're good at and that they love to do and that the world will reward them for doing. So let people do that, set them up for success with the resources they need, and then get out of their way so they can do it.
So what's a good actionable first step that someone can just on their own, they're feeling overwhelmed and firm, the management, ops, finances, they're not fully managed. Well, what's a good way to get started on this?
I mean, I would say step one is just commit to blocking off a specific time on your calendar. And maybe right now, if you're really busy, maybe it's not during the week, right? Maybe it is like a weekend day, like a Saturday or a Sunday. Block off an hour and just kind of sit down and, if you've got access to your financials, pull it out, take a look at where your firm is. But more importantly, kind of do those soul searching questions like, am I happy with the type of work I'm doing? Am I happy with where I'm spending my time? What's sucking my energy away? Where do I get energy from my business? And figure out if this was easy, what would it look like?
Yeah.
That'll plant that seed and get you thinking about ways to improve.
Yeah, I think that's such good advice. And are there any specific tools or frameworks or professionals such as yourself that you recommend to start getting on a path to improving the financial and operational health and overall performance of your business so you can start to enjoy life and your work?
I mean, there's a lot of tools and a lot of resources out there. And part of the challenge is that there's an abundance or an overabundance of information. And if a lack of information was the only problem, everybody would have a financially successful firm. So,
Right.
and I suppose this is a little bit biased, but I do think it helps to have a call with a professional who's worked with law firms and can kind of really quickly on a free 30-minute call, take a look at your financials, where your business is and where you want to go, and can start to give you kind of, suggestions to improve things.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, over the years, I've had a lot of coaching, different types of coaching for my businesses. Initially it was like, do I really need, is this something I can't? And you can figure it all out yourself, right? There's books, but the thing I realized is you figuring out it's going all over here, working with a coach, it's a much more direct process. And I want to tell people how they can get in contact with you. We're talking here with Brian Zaff. You can reach him at his website, www.flight.financial. Okay, so there's no .com there, www.flight.financial. But Brian offers, you can book a call with him, like a right fit call, and he also offers you a free financial assessment. So what does that look like?
Yeah, so with the financial assessment, I'll take a look at your past couple of years of financial data, and I'll, examine the trends and put together a short presentation. We'll hop on an hour-long call where I'll walk you through, here's what I see. I'll ask you a couple questions to drill in, and you'll come away from that call with just a few clear, actionable insights for what's holding you back and things you could do to get where you want to be.
And that sounds really generous in terms of you're going to spend time evaluating their business. You're going to spend another hour on a call reviewing it with them. I can't imagine not taking you up on that. That's an easy one to say yes to. And then beyond that, if somebody decides they want to go beyond that, what type of services do you offer? How can you help these firms working directly with them?
Sure, yeah, and I work on kind of a monthly basis, but if somebody decided that they want to work with me, it's kind of an initial 6-month period where we'll hop on, we'll do a more robust version of that financial assessment. We'll set growth targets with them. And then each month, I'll work with them on kind of reviewing what's going on in their business and what do we need to do to get things where we want them to be.
Yeah, it sounds great. So I would say if you're an attorney that has been feeling any of the things that we have been talking about, certainly just worth a call with Brian just to get a sense of it, because again, it just starts with the mindset shift. Even if you're not ready to do everything right off the bat, schedule that hour a month. Just start thinking very broadly about your business, where you want to be, what metrics you want to measure, and then get Brian to help you with these things. Because Because here's the other thing too, in terms of the coaching that I've had, again, you're like, hey, I could do a lot of these things on my own or learn this stuff, and you'll learn faster with a coach. But the other big piece of it is the accountability, right? If you're paying for something, you're paying for someone's time and energy to go into your business, you tend to not want to let them down. Whereas if you just have goals that are off, okay, and then before you know it, it's your monthly review and you didn't do what you said you were going to do and so forth. So I imagine that's a piece that is really important to what you add.
100%, right? Like we tend to value the things that we actually invest in. And if we've got somebody else that we know we have to show up for, or they're going to call us out on it, we tend to get more done that way.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Brian, thank you so much. Again, you can reach Brian, www.flight.financial. I have his email here, brian@flight.financial, again, no .com. And you can book a call with him directly on his website. And he's going to get you a free financial assessment, which sounds like a great offer.
Thanks, Jason. I appreciate it.
Yeah, great to talk to you, Brian. And I'd love to have you on again sometime, and maybe we can dive into some of the specifics. But this has been a great start, so I thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Alpha Lawyer Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Marsh, and I appreciate you joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with other lawyers who might benefit. You can find more resources and insights on building a thriving law firm at alphalawyer.io or the Alpha Lawyer YouTube channel. Till next time, keep building the firm of your dreams so you can live your best life.